Welcome to Unit 2, everybody. It's good to see as many of you here as there are. I know I was looking at the turn-ins leading up, and it's definitely been a chaotic couple weeks, I know, for a lot of people, but this, I would say, is the biggest hurdle, is the Unit 1 to Unit 2 deadline. And so we made it through what I think is the most difficult part. And so now it's just all about refining your skills, going through a new language, and working towards putting a project together. So I'm thrilled to see everybody. And yeah, hopefully hopefully the transition into Unit 2 is as smooth as possible for some people. I know there has been a little bit of a shakeup in the groups, and I just ask that you treat that as a new opportunity to get to know people. If you are in a TA group where most of your people are retained and you're getting in a few new people, the main thing I ask you to do is be very welcoming to the new people. Make sure and create an environment where it's easy for people who are new to your group to jump right in. And yeah, just the main takeaway from today's studio, I want to be to get to know your new TA, get to know the new people in your group, and also make sure your IntelliJ is working, and that everything is as it should be there. Other than that, I do not believe I have any additional announcements for today, other than, oh, wait, one more thing. Just make sure you check Canvas, or you check that sign-in sheet to make sure that you are in the right TA group. So, because when we transition to Studio, some of the TAs might not have had a chance to personally add you to their TA room. So make sure that you know that you are responsible for being in the right place for Studio today. And if you are unable, if you're unsure where you are at, you can just shoot me a DM at some point. I will be a little bit busy with some other interviews that I'm doing after these announcements, but I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. And with that out of the way, I'm going to give it over to Carrie, who's going to start y'all off on Unit 2, and I'll talk to y'all soon.
Thanks, Colin.
Thanks, Colin.
Okay. So yeah, welcome to Unit 2. You guys had to do a lot of hard work through blood, sweat, and tears to get through Unit 1. I know, and it's a testament to your persistence and your resilience and resourcefulness that you have gotten this far. What Colin said is true. I think getting up against that deadline at the end of Unit 1 is probably one of the most difficult things just to get past, because sometimes that stuff can pile up. But don't be fooled in terms of the pace of the course. It continues to go very quickly. We're going to be covering a lot of information. I said this at the beginning of Unit 1. I'll say it again. I have the challenge of introducing things to you, explaining things to you, giving you lots of extra examples and those sorts of things without making it too complicated or too big. And that's a very difficult balance for me to find. I want to give you more information, so I'm not just regurgitating what's in the book, but I also want it to not be too overwhelming. So I'm constantly evaluating that. I'm probably going to make some changes to some of the examples I had from this unit the last time I taught it, to narrow it a little bit. But we're going to have some fun, because this is where things get cool when you start to learn about how to have a persistent back end where you can save data in a database and have a website that actually you fill out a form and submit stuff, and it actually saves it and updates the information. We're going to work toward that, but the first thing we have to do is to learn how to write code in Java. So that's what we're going to discuss tonight. We're going to start with just the basics tonight. So we got a couple of chapters, chapter 1 and chapter 2. I'm just going to cover a few things from chapter 1 and then we'll spend most of our time on chapter 2. Unit 2 resources. So if you go to the class announcements channel in Slack, and you will look here at the bookmarks at the top and see that there is now a Unit 2 folder that has the same names of links, but I actually have new playlists for a couple of them. The lecture recordings and studio reviews will now be new playlists, and so you'll have that access to that whenever you want, right there at the top of class announcements. Okay, so while we have a couple of classes here, we actually have some days off coming up. So you have a catch-up class on the 31st, and there will be a guest speaker from the Launch Code Company team, unless they've changed their minds, but I'm pretty sure that's on the schedule. And so that means everyone will come to this Zoom link initially, and then you'll break out for your studio groups for the rest of the class. Then there's no class at all for Labor Day on the 4th. But there will be graded assignment number 1 due on the 7th. So that actually means you have not just the catch-up class, but you have an extra few days because of the holiday. And that will cover concepts from chapters 1 through 4. And we're going to be covering those, pretty quickly here in the first 3 classes. So I encourage you to, again, with the whole pace of the course thing, if any of you really struggled to, in getting behind in Unit 1 and feeling like, oh my gosh, I've got all these graded assignments coming down the pike. For one thing, there's only 4 in the Java unit. There's not 6, but a couple of them are pretty big. So, start strong, keep yourself, on track, do the practice exercises in the book, do the studio assignments. Work with other people, do your study groups, go to office hours, take advantage of this wonderful community. This is why Launch Code, people who really succeed at Launch Code do it because they take advantage of, the TAs and their peers and the sense of community where you can actually go and strive together to reach your goals. So, so that's all I'm going to say about that. But you guys, you made it here. I know you can do this. So yeah, we'll get through it one class at a time. And by the end of Unit 2, you're going to do some really cool stuff. All right. So, the first chapter, Introduction and Setup, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Java. And then I'll show you examples of, using Java in the terminal and using it in IntelliJ. So Java is popular, very widely used. It's a server-side language, not a client-side like JavaScript. It's used for backend development. Typically, it's used everywhere. I mean, any sort of sector you can think of, there's going to be some Java behind the scenes in a lot of places. And most Android apps use Java, but Google is moving more towards Kotlin, but it's a process, right? Java is heavily used by companies that partner with Launch Code in St. Louis. And since, that's the mothership, this is something, they decided pretty early on, we need to, make sure Java's a solid part of this curriculum. So a lot of folks who go into apprenticeships go into Java apprenticeships, not all of them, but a good bit. Okay, so here's an example stack. You've already learned JavaScript. You've learned React for front-end development. Now you're going to learn Java. You're going to learn how to create a Spring Boot project with Java and create a SQL database. And that will give you a backend. So if you look at this, diagram, you have a backend with the the Spring Boot app, and you can have some endpoints that you can set up as an API. Now, let me not forget to say this. Unit 2, this is Unit 1. This is Unit 2. Putting it all together, like actually making an API for something like a React application, that's what you'll do in Unit 3, in what we've have traditionally called liftoff. So you won't actually be putting it all together this unit. You're just going to learn how to do all the things on the back end that will position you to work together with a group during liftoff to do a full stack project like this. So, exciting things are ahead. This is how this is done in the real world. And you're going to be picking up everything you need to take care of the second piece and position you for making a really cool project in your third unit. Okay, so ways that Java and JavaScript are different or the same in some cases. JavaScript is considered a dynamic interpreted scripting language. It was originally designed, if you remember me talking about this in Unit 1, it was designed for use in the browser for the client side. It's loosely typed. You don't actually assign types up front. It's just inferred after it compiles at runtime. It has a very relaxed syntax, and it's heavy on functional programming, but it does allow classes in recent years for some object-oriented programming. And it's commonly written in a text editor like VS Code. Most front-end developers are just going to use something like that and not necessarily a really big IDE. It's very easy to learn as a first language. This is why we start with JavaScript. Java is not a dynamic language, it's a static language. It's a compiled language. It's designed for server-side use. And it's strongly typed. So you have to declare the type of your variables up front. It has a very strict syntax. You cannot, leave a single thing out of place or it will complain at you. It is entirely based on object-oriented programming. So this means everything is class-based. So you may have some classes that are actually meant for creating objects, but you're also going to have classes, and this is what we're going to look at tonight, that don't have anything to do with creating objects based on a class like you learned in JavaScript. They're just classes because Java is class-based, and you're going to learn how to execute code within that. It's commonly written in a full IDE, integrated development environment. So we're going to use IntelliJ. Eclipse is also a popular one. Java is considered to be a little more difficult to learn, but here's the thing: once you've learned a language, especially one that's not has a lot of similarities in some of the syntax, it's not hard to take that next step and just learn another one. And so I don't know. I mean, like in the past few years since I was a student at Launch Code, I'm not even sure how many languages I've picked up, maybe 5 or 6 or 7. Yeah, easily. Maybe more, just different situations or whatever. I mean, seriously, once you kind of learn 1 or 2, you can just kind of keep going from there. So it's going to feel different for sure, because there are so many things about it that, require you to think about things a little bit differently, but you'll pick it up. You'll be okay. All right. So how do you use Java in the terminal? You can run Java in a CLI once you have it installed in your local machine. You can test it in the terminal. And so you just want to navigate to whatever directory you want to create your file in. You can create a Java file, .java. You can use a text editor like Vim or Nano. I'm a fan of Nano. And I have a hate-hate relationship with them. So code a basic Java class with a main method, and we're going to get into this, and I'll explain later what a main method is and what it does. But you can just do something like that just so that it'll execute your code, and then you can just save and exit it, and then use the Java command in the command line to execute the file. So let's say I'm over here and I create a file, and I'm just going to, you can use the touch command to create the file first and then edit it. But if you nano a file that doesn't exist, it creates it for you. So I'm just going to do it all in one step. And I'm just going to call this example.java. And now I'm in the editor, and I've already got this on my clipboard. So I'm just creating this example class. Don't worry about the syntax right this second, because I'm going to go over all of this in detail so you know what it all means in a minute. But we've got here a perfectly valid working class that had, Java class that has a main method so it can execute the code when you go to run it. So I'm just going to exit out of that and save it. And then I'm just going to say Java example.java. And it says you can run Java in the terminal, because the only thing I did was actually print that to the console. Okay, so that's how you do it. It's as simple as that. All right. So if you want to use Java and IntelliJ, they have multiple options for opening a Java project. Again, you'll have to have both Java and IntelliJ installed. And then once you have that, you can do it one of three ways. You can create a brand new project, which I will show you how to do in just a second. And you can also open an existing project from your machine, something you worked on before, or maybe something you downloaded the project files. Or you can clone something from version control like GitHub. So when you are cloning something from launch code, this is a great way to do it. Just use that third option to get it from version control. And then it walks you through the steps. Just, it wants the link, and then it'll, get it set up for you. So let me show you the first one, just how to create a new project. Let me make sure I got the right window here. Yep. Okay. I don't know how well you can see this. It is a little bit small probably, but the first thing up here, I'll just talk about it. Actually, hold on. I think I have another slide. I'm not paying attention to my next slides. Yeah. Okay. So you can create this, and I will demonstrate this, but you want to use either Pascal case or kebab case, which I think kebab case, in my experience, is more common. But for the project name, that's the first thing. And then you can select a directory for the location where you want it to live on your computer. You can have it initialize a Git repo for you locally, and then hook that up later, set the remote link later. But sometimes, you may have already, created the repo. So it just depends. But if you're doing it this way and you're just creating a new project regardless, then, you have that option, or you can just do it later. You choose Java as the language. For what I'm going to demonstrate in a second is just Maven for the build system, and I'm going to talk about that. When we get into Spring Boot, you will be using Gradle for the build instead, but Maven will work for now. And then select Java 11, just so it's kind of consistent for everybody. That's kind of where we live for a little while. Okay, so I really should be looking at what my slides are. Oh yeah, you can have it add sample code if you want, because you're new at this. It'll put like at minimum like the package at the top or whatever. But let's actually go over and do this. So I'm gonna come over here, and I'm just gonna say, good heavens, hello world as the name. I'm just sticking it on my desktop because this is temporary. Java, Maven, and I'm going to change this to 11. I am not going to add the sample code, and we'll just create it. Okay, and it created it on my other screen, so give me a second. Come on, there we go. All right, so it opens up, and you can kind of see here, it started off and it's got this weird looking file if you're not familiar with XML. And this is Maven uses XML for its configuration. So that's what's going on here. But what you want to do is come over here to the source folder. And from there, you can get into main and test. Main is where all your code goes that you run, or the things that you draw from. And test is where you would put unit tests, things like that. So I'm going to go into the Java folder here and right click and say I want to create a new Java class right here. And I'm just going to call it Hello World. And this is going to definitely be in Pascal case for the class name. And it just starts me out with a public class. And I can go from there, and I can create a main method, and I can print something and say hello world. Okay, so that's right there. We've got something we can execute, right? Just like we did before in the terminal. So right here, you'll see this green arrow. You can right click on that because you will eventually be able to go up here to the configuration and like select something that it'll have a little drop down. But we haven't done that yet. So we have to run it for the first time. You can right click here and say run it hello world.main, because that's the method from the hello world class. Or you can do it over here, and you have a much bigger menu to wade through, but it's down here about in the middle. Same thing, run hello world.main. So, this is a static class. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I'm sorry, a static method. And so that means you can just call it on the class. You don't have to have an object or anything. So let's do that. I'm going to right click here and say run it. And down at the bottom, there's a menu at the very bottom of IntelliJ that has some different panes that will open up, your to-dos, your terminal, and things like that. But this is the run pane. And there it is, hello world. So it just gave us that output. And then it says process finished with exit code 0. It looked like an 8 for a second. I'm like, that's not right. It's definitely 0. Okay, which means everything was cool. Okay, so we ran a simple class. There we go. So that's just a basic way to create a project, and you can kind of build whatever you want to build from there. But we can take that away, come back over here. And yeah, so here again, here's this file structure, just to be clear. This is based on that Maven build, so it's definitely going to be different when we get into Spring, and some other builds can be different too. But for this type of structure, you might have that source folder at the up within the project, and then main is for most of your code. Test would just be for unit tests, and then the Java folder is going to be in main in this structure. And then you'll see this folder called org. So that's just kind of the default way to say, this is how I'm grouping all of the packages for this project. And then you'll have, however many packages you want to have, you can name them whatever you want in there. And then inside those packages, you can have, multiple classes and whatever main file you want to have that has a main method. It doesn't have to be called main, but whichever one has your main method that's going to kind of actually execute all the code. So packages are usually all lowercase or snake case with the underscore, and then your classes will always be Pascal case starting with a capital letter. But you'll add those classes inside your package. Okay, who has questions about what I've talked about so far? Sneha?
Yes, so you talked about that POM file, right? But when we had the repository downloaded, this clone one for WebDev projects, it doesn't have any POM file, but it has some creative files, and we were told to select Maven, and it's very confusing because some of us face problems, and then we had to mark that source, the root, something like that.
Right.
So it's all. Can you explain that a little bit, like why that happened?
So you're going to have different projects with different builds, depending on what it is that we're doing and depending on what launch code is providing for you. In some cases where you're cloning something that already exists from them, right? Like your Java Web Exercises repo. So you just kind of have to pay attention to which one is which. And it does not need to be complicated for right now because you guys are doing the absolute most basic stuff. When we get into Spring Boot, you're going to get to know Gradle really well because you're going to have to do a number of things to build it and, pay attention to the dependencies. And there'll be like certain files you'll have to go into to, make changes and things. Don't worry about that for now. So really, what I just demonstrated to you should work fine for most basic projects for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Connor.
A few people are wondering, are we using Java 11 or 17 like the book had us do?
Oh, did the book say to do 17? I'm sorry.
It did. Yes.
Okay, then yes, use 17. I'm sorry. I only
Okay.
I only just found out, as you all did, that there was a updated curriculum. So yes, 17 is definitely what to use. I will make sure to fix that for next time I teach this particular class. Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I want to get into the data types chapters, chapter 2. We're going to talk through the first basic things about, how to set all this up. And then we'll take a break and come back and do the rest. So yeah, so we'll talk about this idea again that I mentioned before of static versus dynamic typing and what that means for Java. I'll go over how to print to the console in some detail, since I know I kind of, I did it for you a couple times, but I did it real fast. And then we'll talk about strings and characters, what the differences are between those two types. And then primitives, like, Boolean and different types of number types. There's multiple number types. It's not like JavaScript where there's just a number. And then after we take our little break, we'll come back, talk about packages and imports, how to write methods, how to use methods that are maybe in another file, another class inside your package. And then we'll learn how to use the scanner library for user input. And so this will give you all the building blocks for, building basic programs in Java. And of course, next class, we'll be talking about conditionals and loops and things like that. All right, so let's get into this. Static versus dynamic typing. You have to specify types in Java. It's required. So like I said before, JavaScript inferred the type from the value, but and TypeScript, which we talked about, that's something that's often used as a way to require types with what feels like JavaScript, because it's a superset of JavaScript. But Java always requires that you assign the types to variables up front when you're declaring them. So there's a lot of different types. We're going to get into them now. Oh yeah, well, in a minute after we do the printing to the console. So if you want to send data to be printed to the console, there's a built-in method called printline, and it's println. And the full syntax that you have to use is system.out.println, because it's coming from a separate package, and you don't have to import it. It just is built in. So it's kind of like console log, right? In JavaScript, you didn't just say log, you said console.log because it was coming from the console API, but it was something that's just built in. You didn't have to import it or anything. So system.out.println, and it looks a lot like this, which you already saw me do, where, inside your main, where you're actually writing the code that you want to be executed, you can just, call it like that, system.out.println, and then just put that argument in there. So there's the built-in method, and there's the argument that you want to be printed. So you saw me do this in lightning fast earlier. Here's the tip. So in IntelliJ, you can use this shortcut SOUT for standard for system out, and just use the tab to complete it, and it will just boom create it for you without you having to type the whole thing in. Not to say I don't recommend. I mean, let me make my words in the right order. Not to say that I am saying you shouldn't ever type it out. It's good practice to type this stuff out to get in the rhythm of it. But if you are like me and you want to learn all the shortcuts to save yourself time and be more efficient, SOUT will do that for you. Okay, so let's go over to a different project here that I've got, and we're going to just practice this real quick. Give me just a second here. All right, so it says to do, use system.out to print to the console. So I'm just going to say system.out.println, and I'm going to give it welcome to Unit 2. All right, something real simple, right? Okay, and then I can actually run this, and I've run this before, so this is where you can kind of come up in here and you can see, oh yeah, there it is. And I can just run main right there. Looks like it's taking a second. Okay, maybe that's the wrong one. I have a oh yeah, there it is. It just didn't open it up. Okay, so oh, this is sorry, my bad. Let me get out of that. I think this is left over from what I was doing earlier. Okay, so let's do it up here. I'm gonna run it from here. Yeah, okay. Oh. What is happening? Oh, it's in the wrong, it's the wrong file. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know what just happened. That was really weird. Why is it trying to open something in a completely different project? Wow. Okay. Huh. It's trying to go to class 7 and I'm not in class 7. I'm here. Okay, I'm going to do it right. Let's just try this one more time. Run this one, yo. Yeah, it's not running this one and I don't know why. You know what? I'm going to close this and reopen it. And I have to do it off screen because I'm on my TV and it doesn't give me the bar for some reason. Let me close that. Quit. Sometimes IntelliJ gets jammed up and you just have to kind of like restart. So let me do that and see if that'll help. Problem solving on the fly, guys. We're going to do a lot of this, by the way, because stuff happens. Yeah. Okay, here we go. All right. And it's, of course, too big for the Zoom recording. So, oh my goodness. Thanks for bearing with me, guys. All right. All right. So we're here and I have autosave on. So it saved everything. Let me just see if I can get it to. Oh, it's still doing it. I don't understand this. Does anybody know have any clue what's going on?
Hey, Carrie,
Yeah.
I've run into this issue a lot at work, especially when I'm doing multiple files.
Hmm?
The cache in IntelliJ gets mixed up from time to time and it doesn't know what you're supposed to run. Usually starting it and closing it and restarting it like you did fixes it. But you sometimes have to go in and clear out the cache for IntelliJ.
Oh, I haven't done that.
And I have to look that up every time I do it. So
I know. Oh my gosh. And of course it's during lecture, the very first lecture of Java. Okay.
Yeah.
Naturally. Okay. All right. Well, let's go do this. This is how we learn, guys. Okay. How to clear cache in IntelliJ.
Carrie, it's in file and invalidate cache.
File.
In IntelliJ.
Okay. Again, I have to do this off screen because I don't have access to the menu bar on my TV. All right. Invalidate and restart.
Yep, that's good. And you can check the first box or leave it unchecked.
Like in IntelliJ, in file option, there is an option called invalidate cache.
Yeah, I just did it. It's coming back now. All right. Let's try this again. All right, there we go. All right. Just had to get the build. All right, so let's see if it runs the right one now. Yeah, welcome to Unit 2. Okay, so that was a learning experience, guys. I remember this as a student that there just stuff comes up sometimes where there's just real squirrely stuff and you just have to do your research, push through it, ask for help, just like I just did. And there were people here who had more experience with this than I did who were able to help me. So yeah, so when you run up against things like this, don't be discouraged. There is a solution. And usually if you can't find the answers right away online, you know, somebody else will be able to point you to it. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so we have a working running program now. Awesome. So we can keep going with this. But that's it. That's all you have to do to print to the console. Okay, so let's get back to our slides. Good heavens. All right, so let's start talking about these data types. Strings and characters. Strings have to be declared with string, the type, capital S. Strings are immutable, just like they are in JavaScript, but strings in Java require double quotes. You can't use single quotes. So make sure you use double quotes. And characters, on the other hand, you have to have a single character it requires single quotes, and it can be like letters, digits, punctuation, white space characters, escape characters. So here are some examples where you've got, you know, a letter, a digit, punctuation, new line. those are all valid characters. Okay, and I'm going to come back over here and find where, here we go. All right. All right, so here is where we're going to have a little bit of a theme. So those of you who are into D&D might be familiar with Critical Role. I kind of got on a real big Critical Role kick last year. And so I'm going to, declare the type string and then say new fave show, because at the time it was my new favorite. And I'm going to call it Critical Role. All right, so I have just created a string with double quotes. I'll do another one. String, fave actor. And I'm going to say Laura Bailey. She's precious. Okay. And then my favorite PC is her character Jester in campaign 2. And then my favorite NPC is absolutely 100% Kumatsul. Matt Mercer's hilarious when he does that character. Okay, so we have now 4 strings that have been declared and initialized, right? So I'm going to print a concatenated string where I'm going to use all these together. Now, Java doesn't have the template literal that you've used with JavaScript. So we're going to be doing the whole, string and then using this plus, concatenation symbol here. And I'm going to say new fave. Oh boy. So, you know what? I lost time because of that little hiccup we had. So I'm going to actually just copy and paste this for the rest. Downside of using my TV through Wi-Fi is it's a little laggy sometimes. Okay, so my new favorite show is plus new fave show plus starring fave actor as fave PC. My favorite NPC is fave NPC. So this should look fairly familiar to you, this method of putting together variables and strings, right? And then I'm just going to print that. So let's run this again. I can come up here and just hit this button now. And there we have it. My new favorite show is Critical Role, starring Laura Bailey as Jester. My favorite NPC is Pumatzel. Okay. Great. Okay, so let's move on and talk about some of the common string methods you can use. Care at, and then you just give it an index will allow you to access a specific character. Substring is it works like slice does in JavaScript, where you just give it that starting and then the index after whatever your last character is that you want. You can take a substring out of a string. Index of works just like JavaScript. Split works just like JavaScript. Trim, guess what? Works just like JavaScript. Same with 2 uppercase and 2 lowercase, and concat. And then here's something that's different. So this is different. Length, this is actually a method, not a property. So it requires the parentheses. So in JavaScript, you could just say .length as a property, but with Java, you gotta actually call it as a method, and it'll return the length. Contains is different. It works like the JavaScript includes, but it's the same concept. But you can look for a string, like a substring within a string. Equals is a way that you compare strings. You actually can't use equality operators to compare strings in Java, or you have some unexpected results. And give me just a second here. I have completely lost track of some of my windows. All right, here we go. Yeah, okay, so that's just, knowledge for you. I'm not going to do any examples of that right this second. We're going to move on and talk about some of the other data types. Here we go. Okay, so let's talk about primitives. There are a bunch of different number types, as I mentioned before. You declare an integer with int. A decimal number that's up to 7 digits is with float, but as we'll see in a second, there's some special syntax that's required there to cast it to it. And these days, memory is not a problem like it was many, many years ago. So it's really not necessary to use float most of the time. And you get more accurate calculations when you use a double instead, because you can have more digits. And so you want to use double instead of float for accuracy. So here's some examples. You know, you've got a number, you've got like a small decimal number, a large decimal number. And you'll see that little F after that. I'm actually going to show you in a second. We get done with this slide. I'll show you another way to do that too. So Booleans are declared with Boolean, which you'll be familiar with. That's just like JavaScript. The value is true or false, not surprisingly. And char is actually a primitive type, but string is not. String is considered an object type. And we'll talk more about that as time goes on. But you know, so you can have a Boolean like is even equals false. You can have a char that's like a letter. Remember, you got to use those single quotes when you've got chars. But these are all primitive types, all these different types. All right, let's come over here and do a little bit more of this. So I'm going to just say, you know, int nice round number is, you know, 7. And then I'm going to try something. I'm going to say, you know, float a decimal number, and I'll just say 1.2345. Notice immediately IntelliJ throws up this, let me get this, you know what, and let me close this too for now. All right. IntelliJ throws up this squiggly red line underneath and shows that there's a little error, right? That's because you have to cast it. You can't actually just declare it directly like that. So we're going to comment that out, and we're going to do something different. I'm going to say float and say small decimal number equals, you know, 28.1 F. That's valid. I can also do it like this. I can say float and call it another small decimal number, and use parentheses like this. And then say, you know, and do something like this. And that will also cast it to float. But I'm showing you this just so you know, I cannot think of a time where you're actually going to use this during Unit 2. You're typically going to be using ints and doubles. So we'll say double large decimal number. And I mean, I can just be like, you know, 13 point blah, 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 and have, that's too many, a bunch of decimal places. And those are all, you know, perfectly valid. So I can say, I want to print the nice round number. I want to print the small decimal number. Got to skip the one that we know doesn't work. Do the same thing with another small decimal number. And then we'll do the last one, the large decimal number. And we will go ahead and run it. There we go. So we see all 4 of our numbers come out there as expected. Okay, let's do real quick. We'll just, for the sake of covering all the bases, we're going to say Boolean is even equals false, and then we'll print it is even. All right, and then we'll run it again. And there you go, we see false. Okay, so that's all pretty straightforward. That's just, you know, the key is to remember that you always have to put that type up front, so that it is established from the beginning when you're declaring your variables. All right, so the last thing to talk about with primitives is this idea of autoboxing. So there are non-primitive object types that correlate to every single primitive. So there's capital I integer, that's the object type for int, capital F float for float, capital D double for double, capital B Boolean for Boolean, and capital C char for char. It used to be that you had to actually like write some lines of code to convert one, from one to the other. They called that boxing or unboxing, to make it possible to use the object type, or vice versa. But modern versions of Java will automatically do this for you, and that's called auto-boxing. That's the idea of auto-boxing. And really, you're going to, can't find this at all. I need to move my, hold on. There we go. You're probably not going to see much an example of this until we get later in the unit, when we're working with some Spring projects and databases and these repositories and all these like built-in methods from these other libraries. And that's where you'll start to see where it becomes important to pay attention to whether you're using an object type or the actual primitive. And then you can make use of that auto-boxing. So for now, just know it's best practice to use primitives wherever possible. And then you don't even have to worry about it. And typically you're going to learn as you go instances where you actually do have to use the object type. And like I said, we won't do that till later in the unit. Okay. Let's see, who has questions about everything that I just talked about? No questions? That stuff was pretty straightforward. Okay, well then we're going to take a 5-minute break. And when we come back, we will talk about packages and methods and how to do user input. And it's not automatically playing. Fix that. All right, welcome back. Let's talk about packages and importing. So I mentioned that, Java uses this thing called a package to group together files that are related. At least that's how you're supposed to use it. And we're going to talk a lot more about that when we start getting into Spring and things like that. But for now, just know that the package declaration needs to go at the top for all of your Java files, your Java classes. And so that package is a keyword, and then you actually list the name of the package starting with org. So if your package name is example, it's org.example. And if you have classes and other files, you can use the import keyword, follow with the package and class names. So you can see here, this has got Java, and it's got a nested package called util. And then, scanner is the name of the class that you're actually trying to access. So this is something that's built in to Java, but you do, in this case, it's something that you do have to import. So here's another clarification though. You use it for things like scanner that already exist out there, or maybe some dependency that you've added to your project. Again, we'll get to that much later when we get into Spring projects. But you also may have multiple packages in your project that you've created. So you do have to import if the class comes from another package. However, you don't need to export and import classes that are part of the same package. And this is important because you're going to do this for your studio tonight. It automatically knows about them. Anything that's in the same package, it has knowledge of them. So you don't have to do any explicit exporting and importing like you did with JavaScript modules. So this is helpful. It helps you, make it really easy for you to have your stuff organized in multiple files, but everything already knows about everybody else, in that package. So we're going to, see some examples of this importing in a minute. Let's talk about methods. So the basic method syntax, just remember methods are functions, but that are defined within a class, right? That's the general definition. We made that distinction in JavaScript because we had functions that could just be written and called. But then we also had, some functions that were inside objects or inside classes, and then we called it a method. So here's the thing, Java is entirely class-based, right? So that pretty much means you're just going to call them methods. You're not going to call them functions with Java. So for right now, you can go ahead and just start declaring your methods with a public keyword so that they're just kind of available anywhere. We're going to get into later in the unit the distinction between public and private and things like that. But for now, you can just make them public. And for today, you can declare them as static so that you can just call them on the class, because we're writing classes right now that are just for the sake of running Java code. We're not actually creating objects off of classes yet. We're going to learn about that soon, but we're not there yet. So you want to make sure that they're static so that you can just call them off the class name and not off of any particular object. So the opposite of a static method is called an instance method. So when we start learning about classes, you're going to learn how to write instance methods. And let's see. Oh yeah, you have to declare a return type. So I've got some examples here, and you can see I've added, public and static there. But there's that return type, void and int. So I've said public, static, void, and then I've given it a name, print. And I'm giving it an argument, and of course, the parameter has to have a type as well. Everything has to have a type. Because remember, parameters are just you declaring a local variable that's in scope inside of your method, right? So, when you declare a variable, you give it a type in Java. And then the second one here, it's the same thing, but you can see here we've got two parameters, int n1 and int n2. And then the entire thing returns an integer because it's just returning the sum of those two numbers. Up here, we said it was void. That basically just means there is no return value. All we're doing in this method is printing something to the console. It's going to return undefined. So with Java, you just say that that return type is void. Okay. So anytime you see void, that's what that means. That was not clear to me immediately when I was a student. It took me a while to stumble upon the difference, the distinction there. Okay, so we can write a method this way, but I also want to talk first about the main method, just to help you understand the distinction between the main method, because it's special. Inside any class, if you want to be able to make that the class that you're going to execute your code from, you want to have a main method. So this, you can kind of consider this the primary class for the application, and that's the code that's going to be executed line by line from top to bottom. And it has a standard signature. Use public, static, and void with main, always. And it also has a standard parameter, an array of strings called args, excuse me, plural. So you can see here, we've got the keywords, public, static, and void that go in front of the name main. And then we have the name main, and then we have the parameter, and that just means that this is an array of strings. That's how you type that, and then args. And then your code to execute goes on the inside. So again, here's another IntelliJ shortcut for you. You can use PSVM, which stands for public static void main, and then just hit the tab key, and it creates that whole body for you with that signature. And then you can just start putting in the code you want to execute from there. Okay. So let's go over and do a little bit of work with the methods here. We're going to, let's see, let me get back over to here. Here we go. All right. So we want to write some methods. And the thing is, you don't want to write this is already a main method, right? I've got all this code that I'm executing inside of my public static void main with the string, array of string args. That's this entire thing is my main method. If I want to have additional methods in this file, I need to actually declare them below main. That's the convention. So I'm going to come all the way down here to the bottom to create another method in this class. And this is where I can say, it says code a method to return a full name as a string using a first name and a last name, which tells us what our parameters need to be. So I'm going to say public static string. This is the return type I mentioned, right? I want it to return a concatenated string. So that's the return type. And then I give it a name, get full name. Oops. I want to do my camel case there. Get full name. And I'm going to say parameter 1 is a string. I'm going to call it first name. And parameter 2 is also a string. I'm going to call it last name. Oops. And then here's the function body, the method body. Got to get out of JavaScript land and get into Java. But that's it. We just have to say what we're doing. So I'm returning first name plus a space plus last name. You do this a few times and you start really missing template literals. Okay. So now we come back up here where our to-do was here. It says after coding your method below main, call it here and print the result. So I can actually let me just want to make sure I got what I think I do. Yeah, okay. So if I'm going to print it, I'm just going to do this all at once. I'm going to say, system.out.println, and then I'm going to go to the name, get full name, and I'm going to give it Matt and Mercer. So we did have a little bit more critical role in here. All right. And that'll do it. So let's run it. And there it is, Matt Mercer, all one string concatenated together because we directly called this method that is declared below main right here in the same file. Okay, so that's the one way to do it. Now, what if you have methods that are in other classes in the same package? Pay attention, you're doing this for studio tonight. This is where you actually can call a static method directly from the class. So I can come over here to examples.java. This is the other class I have in this package, class 1, right? And I've got the class and I have 2 methods that I've coded. One is something that returns void because all it does is print, and it's called say hello, and has one parameter, a string called name. So it just prints hello, comma, space, plus name. The second one is add 3 nums with int A, int B, and int C, and you'll notice that the return type here is an int. And then inside the body, the code that it returns is A plus B plus C. So we have these already defined for us. We just want to use them. So we come back over here to main, and inside the main method here, I'm going to actually call these methods from the examples class. And remember what I said, you don't have to put an import statement at the top because they're in the same package. So you can just say examples dot, and this first one, I can just do it directly because it's already coded to print something for me. So I'm just going to say hello, and we'll say hello to Bob. How's that? Okay. And then the second one, this is a little different because it returns a number. It returns an int. So I need to actually print it, and then I can call it. So examples dot add 3 nums, and I'll just give it 2, 5, and 9. And it knows, you can see that IntelliJ is saying A is 2, B is 5, and C is 9, because it's got that definition of the entire thing coming from the other file, from class 1.examples. So this is, an easy way to organize some of your methods in another file in the same package and just use them, boom. But because they're static, we can just call them right in the class, just like that. All right, let's run it. So it says, hello, Bob. And then this one says 16, 2 plus 5 plus 9. All right. So that's all there is to methods. And you can, just write them like that for now. Just have, public static and then the return type. And that'll work for now. Okay, so importing and initializing a scanner. This is how you do user input in Java. There's actually a scanner class that comes from the java.util package. And so we need to actually import that. So let's come up here to this to-do, and we'll just say import, the import keyword. And you know what? Let me finish the slide first, guys, really. I mean, okay. So you use, you use the package name dot scanner, but you use an import keyword. Okay, actually, I will do this separately because I want to talk about the rest of it in a minute. Okay, so I'm just going to say java.util.scanner, and there it is. Okay, so we have this accessible to us now in this file. We can come back down here where these instructions are and use it, and we're going to follow these instructions. So this might seem like it's complicated, and at first it kind of seems like it is because there's multiple steps and things you have to put into place, and you have to know what each part does in the sequence. So I'm going to try to break this down for you as clearly as I can. You first want to declare and initialize an object of the scanner class, and we have the scanner class imported, so you can create it. It's very common to call that variable input, but the type is actually the class. So we say scanner input, as you can see here, scanner input equals a new scanner. We're creating a new object of that class, and then we pass in system.in. So remember, we were using system.out when we were printing something to the console. Now we're saying we want to take something in from the console. So we're using system.in. Then you're going to have this, where you're actually using system.out to prompt them. So you can create the object, but you have to be able to ask them, say something about what it is that you want from them first. And then you can actually start using input from there. So let me see. I'm going to jump to. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I had one more bullet point. So you use that input to receive the response and store it in a variable all at the same time. So that's what's happening on this line right here, where it says int usernum equals input.nextInt. Don't worry about that next int yet. I'm going to explain that in just a second. So there's the import. That's the first thing. And then inside your main method here, you're actually going to first declare that object of the scanner class that you imported and just create a new scanner, pass in the system.in. There it goes, initialize it. Okay. And then you need to proceed the actual, receiving of the information by saying something to them. You have to put something out. So you say system.out.println, enter a number. And then on the next line, you can say, okay, I want to receive it with input.nextInt. Give me whatever the next integer is that they put in. But I need something to store that in. So I'm going to create an int called usernum, and that will store that value when it comes back once they put it in. And then from there, I can use it. So I can say, system.out.println, number, and then give the user number or whatever you want to do with it. You can do whatever you want. But the last thing that you want to do here is to actually close the scanner. We're going to talk more about why you do that later, but that's a good practice to be in. And I want to say this now because this trips students up all the time. You only have to import it once. Once it's there, you don't need to import it again, right? So you can use input as many times as you need to ask for new information and store it in new variables. So you can, have as many iterations of this kind of process as you need, here where you're just this part where you're asking them for something, you're receiving it using that input object, and then, storing it in a variable. But then once you're done with all of that, do that input.close, and close is a method. So you do need those parentheses on the end. Okay, so here's some of these different methods. You saw this nextInt thing, right? You can accept values from the user and cast them to the type that they're supposed to be, all in one fell swoop by using specific methods. And then it will actually, return it as that data type. It'll allow it to be stored that way. So input.nextInt will give you an int, and nextFloat will give you a float. NextDouble gives you a double. Next gives you a string, and nextLine will give you a string in a situation where you might be receiving several lines at once. And then there's methods for validating. So that's all for receiving the data that you want from them. But you also might, in certain cases, want to be able to validate that you're getting what you need. And so you can use these first three just to check if the data type is valid, and it'll just return true or false. So, lost my, I'm clicking. Okay, there we go. And then this last one that I'm going to show you is if you have any remaining data when you're receiving a file with multiple lines of data. So has nextInt, if in fact they entered something that can be successfully cast to an integer, then you'll get a true or a false back. If it can be a float, you'll get a true or false back. If it can be a double, you'll get a true or false back. And then this one has next is just to check to see if there is any remaining data coming when you aren't sure how much is coming. It might be coming in multiple lines, especially when you're just like processing a file or something, instead of like user input. Okay, so here is some example of this. We're going to come over here and do a little bit of live coding, and then we'll wrap up. All right, so we already imported at the top, right? So now we're at the part where we need to actually create a scanner object using the scanner class. So again, the type is scanner. The type is the class. We'll say scanner input equals new scanner. And then we'll pass in system.in. This is how we are going to be receiving the information. So we want the scanner to process it as user input. So now we have input as the variable that represents this object of the scanner class, so we can use it. But we need to precede our input request with the actual text, give them some sort of information to let them know what it is you're looking for. So I can say system.out.println and say enter a whole number. Okay. And then I'll receive that input and store it in a variable. So I'll say, this is going to be an int. We're going to call it the user number. And I'm going to say input.nextInt because I want an int. And then all I have to do after that is do something with it. Since we're just doing a basic example, I'm just going to print something. So I'll just say your number is, and say user number. And then it should print the value, whatever it is that they gave us back. Okay. And then of course, just a reminder, it's a good habit to be in to close this out. Okay. So let's run this. And we will play the part of user. What you do in development, right? Okay, so enter a whole number. I'm going to say 24. Your number is 24. Okay, so that worked. So, when I was first learning this, I did not remember all these steps. It's okay. Just, look it up as many times as you have to until you get to the point where you're real comfortable with it. Because it's a multi-step process, but that's how that works. So you now have learned how to import a class and create an object and get user input with system.in being the method of the methodology. Okay, so let's go back over to here. Yeah, who's got questions? We just talked about packages, we talked about methods, and we talked about the scanner class. Wesley.
So in the scanner do we have to declare all of our inputs in that like where you declare scanner and then before you close it? I'm a bit confused.
Right, so this would be the very first thing you do to open it up. And then you just use input as many times as you need to get different pieces of data. So I could have a second one that, is, I could say, give me your name. And I've told them what I want. And now I can say, I'm going to have a string that's username and say input.next. And then, print something. Thanks. Username. All right, let's run it. Yeah, so this is what I was saying is like, you definitely, just want to remember that you can use it as many times as you need to once you've created the representation of the scanner class that you need. So I can enter the whole number and then I can, give them my name. Thanks, Carrie. So yeah, as many times you need to, and then once you're done with it in that file, you want to close it out.
So you declare it like every time in each file that you're doing user input?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you were doing it like inside a method that you're writing that you might use the method somewhere else, then yeah, you would just do it. You just kind of, you want to open it and you want to close it and then just use it as many times as you need to in between. Josiah.
Hey, in what instances would you use Java to get input from a user versus JavaScript?
That's a really good question. I have not used Java a lot in a console. Wow, the word's escaping me. Context. Really. And I'll be frank with you guys. I am a front end developer. I don't really use Java professionally, hardly ever. So yeah, so somebody else who uses it more often might be able to give you an example of where they might use it in the context of the console. But because we are in development mode and your very first graded assignment is going to be an interactive program that's written in the console, because you will not have learned how to do anything with Spring yet. You are definitely going to want to know how to do this, because it's just like it was with JavaScript, where the first couple of things you wrote, were just in the terminal. So you were using user input as a way to make something interactive, just to learn the process of, writing the code and having it be able to execute and be interactive. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Okay, any other questions? Nope. Okay. All right. So coming down the pike, on Thursday, we're going to talk about control flow and collections. And so we'll be talking about arrays and different types of lists. We'll be talking about, conditionals, which is what control flow is referring to. Then that's the chapter 3 prep work. And then class 3 is the following Monday, and that's the chapter 4 prep work. And that's where we start digging into JavaScript classes, where you're actually going to be working toward creating, the object-oriented programming, being able to create instances of a class as objects. And then there is a part 2 to that, but we won't be doing that until after the catch-up class and Labor Day. So that'll be class 4. Something that I do not have for you with the Java unit is a bunch of practice exercises like I did for JavaScript, because when I was a TA for a couple of cohorts of the Women Plus program, they actually have they have options like tracks for Unit 2. And they had Java, they had C#, and they had, at the time, they had a front end one. So guess which one I did? I TA'd for the front end. So I did Angular one time and React the next time. Got to spend an entire unit on those, which was really fun. But it meant that I did not ever TA for Java, and therefore did not create a ton of practice programs like I did for JavaScript. So unfortunately, I don't have those resources for you, but there are some things, there are places you can go online to run through Java programs just to get yourself really comfortable with it. HackerRank is a great one. Coding Bat is another one that has just, and it ramps up real slow, so it gives you lots of practice. Definitely recommend those if you want to get a little more practice. Okay, so let's talk about Studio. Tonight, you're going to compute the area of a circle. You're going to create a couple of basic classes. So you'll start in the data types / data type studio directory in the Java WebDev exercises project that you should have already forked and cloned as part of your prep work in chapter 1. And you'll just create a file structure within there and create a couple of classes. Area and circle, you're going to practice calling a static method from a class from one into the other. And then there are some bonus missions that'll challenge you to, refactor your code to use conditionals and loops. But to do that, you'll need to read ahead in chapter 3. But this is why they call it a bonus mission. It's just, a little bit of an extra challenge for you. So I actually, full disclosure, do not have this recorded yet, but I'm going to try to do it right after lecture and get it out to you guys later tonight. Yeah, that's it. So, but like Colin said, because you guys have switched around your groups and stuff, the first priority is for you guys to get to know each other a little bit and, you know, get into the groove with your new group. But, you know, you could definitely do that while you are working together to solve this problem if you would like, and, you know, do a little pair programming. That would be a great way to do it. So I'll leave you guys to it. We're coming right up on 7 o'clock Central here. So you will have the rest of class to do all of this, and I'll get those videos up later tonight. And I need to make a couple changes to the slides before I give you the slides, but I'll let you guys know when everything is up.